Well, welcome everyone. It's 12 o'clock. Can you hear me well? Yes. Uh, we'd like to wish you well, Happy New Year. It's the first Sci-Tech Asia webinar of the year, so we would like to give you all our best wishes for 2021. We hope it's going to be a better year than the previous one. Before I hand over the floor to my colleague Loretta Lowe, I would just like to let everyone know, if you'd like to see our previous webinars, they are all available in our website at scitechasia.org, as well as in our YouTube channel, which we are going to circulate via the chat box all information regarding this, the YouTube channel, as well as our website. You can check previous webinars, I repeat, in our website as well as in our YouTube channel. And we have recently launched a podcast series called Techno Views, which is now available via Google Podcasts as well as Apple Podcasts. I'm very much looking forward for this talk by Yichen Rao. So I'm going to hand over the floor to Loretta Lowe. Thank you.
Thank you, Gonzalo. Happy New Year, everyone. I'm really excited about this talk as well. So it's my pleasure today to introduce Yichen Rao, who's a PhD candidate in anthropology and STS at the Hong Kong Institute of Humanities and Social Science at the University of Hong Kong. His dissertation fieldwork, which is funded by a Warner Grant, is about China's internet finance industry. And he is also an Adam Smith Fellow at George Mason University, and he received an Ernst Mach grant at the University of Vienna. So broadly speaking, he studies digital economy, finance, and technology in China, which is also the topic of today's talk. So without further ado, let's welcome Yichen.
Yeah, thank you, Loretta, for the introduction and for your invitation, even before I became a convener of this talk series. And Happy New Year. Welcome to the talk today. Right now, I'm going to share the PowerPoint. Can you see it now, or are you seeing this in the presenter mode or in the, because
Yeah,
I'm confused usually.
I can see.
Okay. 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 So today's topic is called Dreaming Like a Market Beneath China's Rise and Fall of P2P Lending Platforms. It is based on a paper that I recently published at Economic Anthropology, which mostly describes how a P2P market that seems to be very, very difficult to build was actually made possible through this very interesting market design and all the kind of collective unconscious behind this market formation. So I was wondering, maybe we could start with a thought experiment to get us maybe familiar with the key message that this paper wants to send. Because in order not to repeat what my paper has already argued in terms of the theoretical contribution, I might focus more on the empirical details and ethnographic stories that maybe get less space to talk about in the paper. So I'll start with a thought experiment just to get us to understand what happens when a lending relationship is trying to form. So say you are maybe a young student who only have 5,000 US dollars as your savings, and right now someone comes to you, someone that you know very well, comes to you to borrow 2,000 US dollars, and he has very justified reasons or kind of excuses to make you believe that he's gonna use this money for a lot of good purposes. So what would your reaction be, and what might you think about in terms of evaluating whether you're gonna lend this money to him or her? I will let you guys think about it, and if you have any gut feelings or thoughts, you could just type that in the chat box. But since it's different from an offline talk, I could actually see what people's expressions are from a kind of physical appearance. But just feel free if you don't want to say anything in the chat box as well. But yeah, I guess most people might have the reaction of having to think very carefully before lending out the money, because we have to think about whether in the end that this person could not return the money, and how I may maintain my friendship or kind of offline kind of the daily relationship and interaction with this person. And also one has to be really having this kind of preparation that this person might not return the money, and you're gonna lose this money forever, and you would rather do that because you think your relationship with this person deserve it. And it has become a lot of moral frictions that we could see that happen in this kind of lending relationships. And this kind of relationship is becoming more and more difficult to think about when it comes to a stranger who comes to you and asks for kind of a loan of $2,000. Especially takes a large portion of your savings. And what if it's an online stranger, someone that you barely know about, except for his profile saying that, he has a college degree or not, or he has the intention of using this money to invest on some business project, or he just need it for kind of a medical treatment of his mother's health or something like that. So we could actually see that there could be a lot of potential failures that could actually happen when you're trying to form a relationship, a lending relationship with someone, whether you know them or not. And this kind of mini failures actually consist our what we call a risk assessment when it comes to a financial decision. That we think about all those uncertainties that could happen to the money that we lend out or we invested on someone else. And so when you think about this kind of peer-to-peer lending platforms, the whole idea of having a kind of online platform that you could have people who are totally strangers to each other would lend and borrow from each other, and how these platforms could end up succeeding or failing consists a kind of another layer of our imagination of the failures, and how which is also the paper wants to address, is that how when these mini failures were suspended, we could actually dare to dream about this kind of very prospering market of peer-to-peer lending, as in China's case. So, so in this paper, I would start with an ethnographic story that could help us get the feeling of what these failures are about and what is the role of technology in it when it comes to people dreaming about making money from a peer-to-peer platform. So I will start the story. After graduating from a junior college in 2013, Liu Zhipeng, a man in his 20s, worked as a salesperson in Shenzhen, a young city with thriving IT and finance sectors, and decided to embark on a career in the lucrative finance industry. In 2015, he took a position at a peer-to-peer lending company called Easy Fortune, which was willing to recruit people without a finance background. Liu dreamed that someday he could rise in the financial industry, perhaps into a role in securities or funds by riding on the platform of Easy Fortune. At the company, Liu's job was to sell wealth management products. The borrower's debts are bundled by the platform as this kind of products to his clients, the investors or the lenders. The office of Easy Fortune was well furnished and based at a fancy building at the city center. The CEO had a high-end profile and a good local reputation. Liu was happy about his income, which is a basic monthly salary of 7,000 Chinese yuan, which is about $1,000 plus a sales incentive, which is 0.1% of his clients' investments. Sometimes they could reach 3,000 to 6,000 yuan per month when he performed well. His marketing was built on his existing network of friends and relatives and through social media, especially WeChat. His daily job was to introduce attractive investment options to his customers and assure them about the reliability of the platform. But he actually knew no better than they about what happened inside the machine, such as how the borrowers were profiled, how the finance was managed, and how the risk was controlled. On this platform, any Chinese adult with a bank account could join as an investor by using the wealth management app on their smartphones or browsing the official website. After registering an account with their mobile banking information, the investors can determine their investment amount within a range of thousands to millions of yuan. Investors chose from multiple withdrawal periods, usually from 7 days to 1 year, and enjoyed fixed interest return. The easy-to-use functions, friendly interfaces, and a highly visible amount of money earned created a sense of stability and security for the users. More importantly, the profits promised by Easy Fortune were much higher than the other money management channels available to the middle class. Most products Liu was selling could guarantee a return of 10 to 12% annual interest, while the highest return, often with the longest investment term, could reach even 18%, much higher than the only 3 to 5% interest rate of the trust and the bonds offered by banks. So Easy Fortune struck people as the perfect wealth management solution. In 2015, many of Liu's families and friends, mostly middle class, began to display increased wealth anxiety and consciousness of wealth management under the radical growth of housing prices and the dramatic rise and fall of the stock market. When Liu's mother helped Liu share the advertisements in her WeChat group, many of her middle-aged friends with anxieties over the depreciating value of their savings came to consult her about these attractive and lucrative investment opportunities. Building on existing trust, some relatives and friends took thousands or even millions of yuan, most of their life savings from their bank accounts to invest on Easy Fortune. Liu, his mother, and his girlfriend not only took out their life savings, but also applied for 20 credit cards and cashed out 200,000 yuan to invest, dreaming that they could get wealthy over a few years. But the dreams soon turned into nightmares in June 2016, when the platform collapsed overnight and turned out to be a Ponzi scheme. So for those of you who are not familiar with Ponzi schemes were like, those investment objectives that were set to attract investors' money were actually fabricated. So new investors' money were actually used to pay for the old investors' money, which makes this kind of money scheme quite unsustainable on the long term. So according to the police investigation, the platform created thousands of fake assets, fake borrowers' accounts and debts to attract investments from the lenders, which were subsequently directed into the CEO's own accounts. This collapse has influenced all the investors nationwide, despite that only part of the assets are fake. Liu not only sent himself, his family, and his friends into severe economic crisis, but also experienced a dramatic personal crisis. A neighbor who followed Liu's mother to invest on Easy Fortune, but lost 1 million yuan, decided to kidnap his mother in the hope of getting her investment back, since she believed that Liu was a financial insider who could be responsible for her losses. Clueless about the collapse, Liu know better than the neighbor how to get her money back, as the CEO had already fled the country. Moreover, Liu and his friend had to work extremely hard to repay her own heavy debts. Liu suddenly turned from a shining star with the key to prosperity to a debtor with guilt and shame. Though dramatic, Liu's story was similar to the experiences of millions of other self-identified financial refugees who lost their savings, jobs, hopes, and misplaced trust in a massive wave of P2P blasts, or in Chinese called 暴雷. The P2P industry witnessed over 5,000 occurrences of platform blasts since 2013, causing the evaporation of over 100 billion yuan, the life savings of millions of Chinese. The dramatic stories of Liu and his fellow lenders reveal the shifting moral boundaries of these platforms and the people involved. So in the parts that follow, the moral boundary of this financial inclusion will be examined at different levels, connecting the dreams of different actors in the P2P network. These streams help us form a deeper understanding of the role of financial technology in reshaping the morality of the market, and in weaving and sustaining the collective financial unconscious. So I briefly introduced the history of the rise and fall of these financial platforms. As you could see on this picture, the whole industry started actually from 2007 when the first P2P platform called Pai was launched as a kind of original model of the real peer-to-peer lending, that people go onto a kind of online platform and match with the lenders or borrowers they want to kind of borrow or lend money from. But the whole industry only began to start when it was 2014 and 2015. And this is also the period when Liu's story occurred. And this also happened with a lot of other incidents that happened in China, among which the most important one is that China's government write the whole idea of financial inclusion into the working report. And they hope to use this internet finance or new financial technologies to actually boost the economy and to make mutual benefits to the population. And as you could see that in the following years, there are actually still many new platforms that emerge in China, and among which a lot of these platforms are called problematic platforms because they were either turned out to be Ponzi schemes or scams, or they have a serious kind of running management issues. And also, it's worth noticing that when I started conducting my fieldwork from 2018, there are still a lot of platforms in China, but then the problematic platforms, the numbers of problematic platforms began to increase because the state strengthened the regulation against these platforms since then. And after 2 to 3 years kind of regulations and crackdowns, most of the platforms collapsed in the recent year, and until November 2020, which is like 2 months earlier, the China Financial Regulatory Committee claimed that right now China has 0 P2P platforms because all the platforms stopped running normally. They either faced clearing out or they were criminalized by the police because they were suspicious of doing illegal business. So how do the P2P platforms which originated in the UK, which kind of idealize this whole kind of online foreign type peer-to-peer lending to the unregulated banking business, or the kind of Ponzi schemes that ruin people's life savings. So initially, when Pai, the first China's P2P lending platform, was established, it was actually in a format of people going to this forum and talking to each other, and they were sending out their requests for borrowing, requests for loans, and then the lenders who saw these profiles of these people and these requests would actually communicate with these people, either online or offline, and to actually know these people better. And then they would decide whether they were going to lend how much money to these platforms. But then it happened afterward, when some people realized if they are lending on these platforms, they have to risk not being able to claim their money back if the borrower refused to return or delay their payments. Though they have a contract, they will sign a contract, but then even if they sue this person to the court, it will be quite difficult, if not challenging, to actually obtain their money back. So gradually, people lost their enthusiasm about lending on these platforms because of these things happen, and also because PP Dai did not do much things about the money guarantees, as if you are a bank, and if people cannot get their savings or their investments out, there will be some kind of safety mechanisms to help the investors or the savers to claim their money back. There will be insurance funds, there will be a lot of kind of security measures to at least make people build up the trust toward the platform. But because Pai Dai at that time think that they should differentiate from those kind of offline financial business, or they should just call themselves offline financial business. So they decided that they charge no fee for those lending contracts, and then they do most of the work. They're just information mediators who actually just match the lenders to the borrowers kind of passively. But later, as it turned out, this kind of business model cannot really thrive in China's market, as people lost their enthusiasm. So during 2013 and maybe 2012 to 2013, there are a kind of new batch of platforms who identify this kind of problem in the market. They started to think about innovative solutions to this problem. So first of all, they started doing a lot of kind of market engineering by actually setting up some security funds, and then charge the borrowers with kind of insurance fees. So when the lenders could not get their money back, they at least could make sure that there is some that the for. When it happened previously on Pai Dai, a borrower when they require like for maybe 50,000 yuan here enough lending, but if we could actually just make a product that repackage all those borrowing requests, then it makes the investors more flexible, and both parties more flexible and more efficient in terms of transactions. So you could actually withhold people's money first, or withhold people's borrowing requests first. And then when there's kind of new information coming in, you could directly match them efficiently. So you could see that in the below picture, this platform called Hongling Chuangtou promised a starting investment from 50 yuan, and promised a kind of annual interest rate at 15 to 18%. And he said that the principal investment could be repaid if there's there's a delay in the return of the loans, and all these kind of promises actually help people build up their trust, not to the borrowers, but to the to these platforms. So it comes back to our very initial thought experiment. So when there's kind of mini failures or moral frictions that happening inside this kind of peer-to-peer lending relationships, so the technology actually works here to act as kind of a not only an information mediator, but a trust mediator. The platform itself becomes the object of trust, and so that those kind of mini failures are suspended and they were not felt at a daily level. So so here comes the like the main theme of this paper is really about how this market managed to thrive because of the scripts that the designers are putting inside the products. And the concept of script actually came from Actridge and Latour's kind of writings about how designers inscribe their own thinkings into what the users are expected to do with the products. But I developed this concept into a differentiation of the public script and hidden script. And in here, the public script is actually what makes this market justifiable in the first place. So we discussed about the government plan of doing the financial inclusion, which was actually coming from the kind of global agenda of development, for example, led by the World Bank and USAID, thinking about using microloan tools in smaller communities to actually alleviate the poverty. But in China's case, the financial inclusion goes beyond anti-poverty campaigns, because most of the population in China, especially in urban China, are actually have a very strong access to the banking business. Many people have their bank cards, though they don't necessarily borrow from banks. They still have their savings account set up in there, so that they could actually they're already kind of included in the first place, and they are many of them, if they want to start a business or something, they could still get some fundings from the banks. So China's financial inclusion plan is kind of more about how to leverage the internet to reach more population, how to ride upon the technology to make our financial services more efficient and more useful to everyone, so that the economy could grow faster and kind of circulate in a more efficient way. And it's all kind of associated with the China's ambition of having the technology empower the development of the China's dream. And this all happens also with the state's encouragement of entrepreneurial spirits in leading technological innovations in the society, as to strengthen the power of China's competitiveness in the global market. And so that, you know, when these P2P platforms, when they try to expand the market, the first thing they're trying to do was to brand themselves with the financial inclusion, the 普惠金融 slogan, and then they use that to actually build upon their strategies, not only nationwide but also to a global-wide kind of capital market. So as you can see that in China's official news, this Internet Plus Finance was kind of branded with the China innovation power. And then when many P2P companies were trying to branding their strategies, they're quoting like China's dream, my dream, or they're saying themselves as, you know, the first China internet finance stock going to the New York stock market, things like that. But on the other hand, as we talked about, there's some hidden script has to be written beneath this very glorious campaign, because if you only emphasize the, you know, the beneficial part in terms of the social agenda, many people would still have to face the trouble of you know, losing all they trying to lend out to other people. So what they do is actually they come up with separate apps or separate solutions, separate branding to the borrowers and the lenders. So for the borrowers on the upper side, as you could see, if you're using those kind of apps, you know, for example, this one, it talked about that if you don't have money, you could go to this 钱站 app, which means money station. And here it says that if you could, you know, just type in your phone number, your ID card number, then the system will directly check your profiles and then give you a quota of a credit. So the highest the credit could go to 100,000 yuan, and this money could be released to your bank account in 5 minutes. And here is a very clear picture of how you could just easily return those money with down payment sorry, with the kind of by terms payment, and how much you're expecting if you are doing different periods. So it strikes people as this very easy money machine, despite that it's not cheap at all. The credit is not cheap at all, but then it's still very, very promising to certain population who cannot easily obtain credits from banks. For example, the entrepreneurs who do not have, you know, online advertisements. And on the lender side, which is very interesting as well, that there's a very unique design that appeals to people's desires and also the request for the safety, flexibility, visibility, and profitability. So my favorite advertisement for the Chinese apps is when I first started my fieldwork in Guangzhou. I could see this platform called Leader making their advertisements everywhere in the metro station, because at that time, you know, the World Cup was being held, and I don't know how they actually contracted or subsidized the Portuguese national team to make an advertisement for them. And this makes the platform strike people as very solid, strong, because they could actually do this kind of overseas investment or kind of overseas bonding relationships with a national team. But then after a few months of this advertisement, the CEO of the platform actually fled the country, and the platform became the first P2P collapse in Guangzhou. And afterward, you could also see that there are a lot of visibility here showing how much money you could gain within a month. And you could even, when you're using this app, you could even see these numbers growing virtually on a daily basis. And you could see, you're earning like from maybe 20 yuan to 200 yuan or something on a daily basis. Despite that, by the end of the day, those numbers are actually just virtual. They're a kind of virtually driven algorithms that are showing, they're making people feel that they're getting money on a daily basis. But if they want to withdraw the money, they still have to wait until the term comes to an end. Either it's 1 month or 3 months or 6 months, and then at that moment they have to request the money to be kind of refunded from their accounts. And whether that would do really depends on the conditions of the platform by then. So for many people, maybe their first few attempts work very well. This actually enhanced their trust on the platform. But some people who lost money on these platforms, it's also because that, though they think that they have earned the money, but they actually did not really know what happened on the other side of this transaction. Because, at the end of the day, the money they earned from the platforms were actually built upon the borrowers' debts on the other side. And whether the borrowers return the money, they have no way to know that. Because the platform said that they will actually cover with the security funds no matter what. So this is very tricky in terms of the design. But the point here is actually that so this platform, the kind of new designs actually lower down people's sense of mutuality that was existing in the previous kind of attempts at the platforms like Pai, but then drive on people's individualistic kind of gains and returns. Besides, it also actually drive upon the relationality as values, despite that they kind of alienated people's imagination of each other from both sides. Like the lenders don't feel the borrowers don't feel the lenders. But however, to build up the market, they still have to use a lot of offline relationality. And here's the picture of how the platform actually attract elderlies to actually invest on those platforms by sending out rice or cooking oils as incentives or gifts in the local community. And also, we could actually see when these two platforms, they developed into this kind of a very strong kind of market expansion. There are two interesting groups that emerge in the market. So one is called the Pull the Wool, it's Hao Yang Mao, and the other is called Play with the Hoe, Lu Kozi. So the Wool Party, those who actually participate in pulling the wool, was actually a group of investors who only targeted at all the different trial offers by the platforms. After they finished the 1 month trial, they will withdraw the money and invest them onto the trial product of another platform instead of continue working on the one platform. So these activities are called pull the sheep's wool. And this group of people are called Wool Party. The metaphor originated from a comedy sketch aired on CCTV Spring Festival Gala in 1999. The actress Song Dandan played the role of an elderly rural lady who recalled her experience of needing her husband to be a sweater using the wool kind of misappropriated from the ship owned by the production team in the socialist era. So she was later charged by the production team's party as pulling the wool of socialism's ship. Though this term was actually made up by the actress, but because in 1999 the Chinese citizens could already, mock about this socialist term because there are 20 years of reform and opening up. So currently, this term was adapted to usually refer to the middle class practices of taking advantage of special offers from banks or especially the credit cards to claim further discounts or free rewards. But it can also, according to another paper, which author is, I think, in this room as well, it's about the working class Chinese also use some of the low-end news contents apps to make small money from their daily consumptions. So the word can now be probably used to describe any kind of behavior that takes advantage of all the marketing campaigns offered by, banks or kind of internet finance platforms, e-commerce platforms, applications. So it can be compared to low-end arbitrage, where the actors are not those major financial institutions trying to arbitrage the state, but those young middle class and working class ordinary people who are trying to arbitrage whatever business that they think there's an opportunity there. So by 2015, in China's P2P lending case, the influence of the War Party really became phenomenal because there are too many platforms that are trying to make competition with each other. So they use a lot of kind of new user trials or attractive campaigns to actually help them to compete for the customers. So there were a lot of war parties that are just focused on forming kind of a group-based or kind of collective arbitration of these platforms by actually getting those walls from them after the campaign was released immediately. So the war party, despite taking advantage of platforms, on the other hand, were also being taken advantage by the platforms. They are both laborers and consumers because when these people go to these platforms to obtain the extra kind of money, these platforms are also using them as flows, or in Chinese 流量, and use that to attract the capital's interest. So they could tell the investors, the capital investor, that there are many people interested in the platforms, and the numbers look very great, especially as they're going to be listed on the stock market. So the platforms loved and hated the War Party at the same time. On the one hand, the War Party did make their performance numbers look nice, but on the other hand, some War Party may use kind of automating machines that grab too much money from the platforms which did not design the campaign in a quite secure way, which would cause a huge loss. So this is on the investor side, but on the other hand, there are also a group of P2P borrowers who are trying to arbitrage the system in a similar manner with the War Party. So this group is called the Kozi army. The Kozi means whole. The P2P borrowers, as we discussed, they range from small entrepreneurs to maybe migrant workers, students, recent college graduates, white collars with kind of problematic banking credit histories. So they're generally kind of risky borrowers who have financial problems. And one of the informant called Long, I knew her from a kind of defaulter self-help group on QQ, an instant messaging app in China. This person worked as an operation supervisor at a chemical factory. He joined gambling with friends after work, hoping that he could win big. But then after he lost his savings, he went to his friends and families for credits. But then, after people knew that he was using this money to gamble, he cannot get any additional money from them at all. So upon introduction and referral from one of his peer gamblers, he was finally directed to these online lending apps for the depersonalized easy credits as recommended by the fellow gamblers. And you could see after long, were involved in more gambling, his financial kind of a profile became even more problematic as he owed a lot of money to different types of P2P platforms. By April 2019, he had lost in total 150,000 yuan, including his life savings and the credit obtained from different apps. And he also lost his job after his boss received a threatening phone call from the debt collectors. So he could barely make a living with part-time jobs, which made him actually gradually grow into a professional borrower and part of the Kozi army who are trying to take advantage of some easy credit offered by certain apps with higher interest rates, but looser credit assessments. So the low-profile borrowers perceive these credits like holes, the codes opened by chance in a capitalist world that was usually closed against them. While the borrowers captured the holes, these holes also captured them. These holes are trying to grab high interest to cover the risk and turn around faster profits. So the borrowers formed online communities to discuss strategies to obtain the quick cash from these holes. And interestingly, the verb used to describe this action happens to be the same with the what the Hao Yang Mao would later develop into. It's called Lu Yang Mao, which actually described the kind of movement of the man's hands while they're doing masturbation on their penis. So this is a very violent metaphor, though they're kind of more creatively used to describe this very interesting and kind of violent image of kind of more short-circuited behaviors when one seems to be trying to form a masturbatory relationships with the platforms and the machines. Though connected through the P2P platforms, the lenders and borrowers live in separate worlds. The lenders are mostly middle-class individuals who are anxious about the depreciating wealth and the economy of uncertainty. So the P2P strikes them as a money-making machine with a simple promise of high returns, almost a miracle in a new liberalized world where higher reward implies zero guarantees. So many people use the metaphor called onboard the train to describe their reflection of their investment opportunities, whether seized or missed. Investors place their hope on P2P not because they valued mutuality with borrowers, but because they hoped to secure a seat on the already crowded train toward a prosperous future after they missed the previous trends of, say, like entrepreneurial waves, bull stock markets, and the booming housing prices. And they hoped the P2P would be their right train to prosperity and worried that it might be their last. So in this picture, the key others were not the nearly anonymous borrowers who may never be on the same train with them, but their friends, colleagues, and neighbors who are big from the wealth management. But on the other hand, the borrowers, they're facing different app. They did not know who exactly lent them the money, but perceived these platforms as easy credit machines that felt the need for kind of impersonal, easy loans with smaller interpersonal pressures. For them, the credits were their well-deserved treat after paying the high fees and interest and finding one hole after another. So when I asked Long if he ever thought that his delay of repayment might cause trouble for the lenders, he answered, "I don't know who they are, but the trouble is exactly what we want." He continued, "We hope the machine to collapse quickly so that we can get away without paying the debts. Someone will repay the lenders, but it's not us." So for the borrowers, the key others were also not the anonymous lenders, but those who win from gambling and enjoy great material life and their peer recognitions. So the contemporary market not only sees you from within. This is an argument made by sociologists Forcat and Healy in their paper to describe how the market, especially for example, the credit market, they try to assess you by reading you from within and collecting all those kind of data from you. But in here, the market is also feeling you through containing and configuring your anxiety, desire, relationships, and hopes. The roles of technology in setting up the moral boundary when it is associated with finance, and especially when technology and innovation come into the place, the problematic financial expansion or the credit expansion became glorified as kind of financial inclusion, and the reckless market behaviors became justified. The role of technology in do not only mark the moral boundaries, but also alienated people's relational ethics and send people into short-circuited illusions, as illustrated by the War Party and the Kozi army. So some dreams finally turned into nightmares, not because they were woven by bad characters with bad intentions. People are drawn into the nightmares because the market reproduces itself by subliminating the mini failures of the intersubjective interactions into the subconscious, cultivating short-circuited desires and distancing the actors from building empathetic attunements with one another. It turned out that the market can either thrive or collapse through dreaming, keeping people transacting with the alienated others or the imagined selves on unstable institutional grounds with flexible boundaries. As we know, the platforms did not forget about social relationships. They trying to exploit people's relational values. So to turn relationality into values, the market created very alienated imaginations of the social through exploiting the social relationships and doing the moral distancing. So when the market dreams, it produces a collective unconscious by suppressing certain connections while foregrounding the others, which directs the financial actors toward experimental trajectories that produce unintended consequences. So finally, what can we do to actually save people from drowning into the nightmares and stop and actually build an ethical imagination of finance? The only way, I think, is to stop engendering more this kind of fantasy technologies and the management structures that suppress the social frictions and mini failures that remind people about our mutual existence and mutual intertwinement. We should only build an ethical imagination of finance when we call the meaningful moral performances, social frictions, and intersubjective failures back into our consciousness as a reminder of our mutual entwinement. Thank you.
Thank you, Yichen. It's a great talk. So just a couple of things, because during the talk just now, there were like a few minutes that there were some sound problems. So maybe some people missed some of your points. So yeah, maybe you have just to prepare that when they ask questions, they've asked something that you've already talked about. Yeah.
Sure. I noticed that.
Right now, I'm opening the floor to questions. If you have a questions, you can just use the raise hand function or type it in the chat box. So I'll take the privilege to ask the first questions. So it's very interesting that you emphasize that the people who use the platform, they are middle-class individuals who are very nervous and anxious about what happened to their savings, the depreciation of their savings, which is something that, I mean, I also worry about, like I just put them in the bank and, what will happen to them and how can I, not making big money, but just like at least not, make sure the savings are not depreciated. But I wonder if you can tell us a little bit more about the people, like what's their background and because like for me, I have the same worry as well, but I certainly won't go for these platforms and won't do P2P, lending. I might try bonds or funds, but not P2P. So I think there must be something that's that differentiate individuals from individuals, even though their social backgrounds are similar. So can you tell us a little bit more about these people who go for these platforms?
Yeah, I think it really depends on what you have in terms of the choices, right? So, so if you are maybe in a kind of developed capitalist state, and people might have more choices like bonds and things that they will think as a kind of ordinary choice of financial investment. But in China's case, I think it has something to do with the structure of financial markets, and people's kind of choices become limited in terms of how to better leverage their incomes. So many people, for example, they would go to stock market directly as individual investors instead of joining kind of funds, because people think that they could actually earn big from this investment. And actually the booming of the P2P lending happened in 2015, simply because at that moment the stock market in China goes through a kind of falling, like very rapid falling down, actually get people's kind of investment channel even more narrowed down, because at that time many people have to think about where to put their money otherwise, except for going to the stock market. But if they go to the banks, there's actually choices that they could actually build upon. Like the banks actually launched those wealth management products by working with some trust funds. But then, because of the regulation, the products they design could only promise a very kind of limited return, which is only maybe 3 to 5% of annual interest. So at that moment, when P2P platforms emerge and tell people that they could secure a repayment of like 15 to 18 or even more, even higher interest at the beginning, many people they actually find it very hard to refuse, because there's somebody who are trying to guarantee him or her the payment. And especially, for example, in the story introduced earlier, many people do that because there's somebody they knew, or somebody they have they knew, their friends of friends, or their connections who are working inside those platforms. And they think that we have insiders who work inside these platforms who at least would guarantee that our payback would be done, even if there's some bad things happen. But then it turned out, when this collapse happens, nobody could actually get away very safely.
Thank you. I think the promise of 10 to 20% return, it just sounds too good to be true. But when you mentioned that they actually know some people who work within the platform, it just makes a lot more sense why people would trust that. You probably will touch on these questions later. I would like to learn more about the financial literacy, among the general Chinese population, but I'll go to the next questions. I think Gil has a questions. Gil.
Yeah.
Hi. Hello.
Hi. Hi, Yichen. Thanks for the paper. It was great to supplement your nice article with some visual material. So I wanted to ask you about, there seemed to be some tension between relationality or interpersonal obligations and inclusion. And I think you're saying that with time, inclusion took on a more alienated form, right? With the Ren Dai. And so I'm just wondering, I mean, and I think this resonates with some studies on social media in China, that the internet allows kind of more supposedly meritocratic, alienated forms of interactions, while it's clear that it's also still about the community and exchange, right? So, I mean, I think there's an interesting tension, and maybe you can just say something about how people interpret the failure or the collapse regarding these tensions? I mean, is it just about, okay, the CEO was corrupted, or is there also something about these forms of sociality that are addressed when people interpret the failure? Thanks.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry that my connection was lost. I figured out why, because I connected a hotspot of my phone's network. So there's a call in. My network is kind of broken. So I missed the part after you were saying that internet was promised as a democratic platform. And could you repeat the question?
Yeah. So I was just asking about the failure and the collapse, and when people interpret or talk about the reasons for the collapse, do they point out any ethical problems in the forms of sociality that take place in these platforms? Is it something that's mentioned as part of the problem, or is it just about the technological collapse or the corrupted CEO?
Yeah, that's a very, very great question, because whenever something happens that may cause a kind of mini failure in the system. So for example, if the borrower have a very massive kind of default that could make the returns of the kind of the investment a little bit difficult, people might experience maybe 1 to 2 days of delay when the platform is trying to do everything to cover up to kind of regain people's trust. And then people would obtain the skills as, there are some kind of system upgrades. There are some kind of technological failures. We are upgrading the system on the background so that you're going to experience some kind of delay in the returns of your money, not to make people feel that there are some kind of social frictions behind. And because, the whole I think it goes with the whole idea of why people also trust these platforms, because it is called internet finance, right? And as you said, that internet was stricken to the state and to the people as very positive in China's general development scheme, because internet brings more developed technology, more developed economies, more efficient life. And I have a chapter in my dissertation talking about, how, the whole concept of internet finance only makes sense in China, because no other country talk about financial technology as internet finance. People talk about, Bitcoins, talk about blockchains, but no one kind of put these terms kind of awkwardly together. But in China, as a scholar put them together, and people are using this in a very positive form. Especially at the beginning. So many of these platforms, they don't call themselves like P2P lending platforms, they call themselves internet finance platforms. But then I think right now, because of those kind of collapses and failures, the word internet finance becomes a dirty word in China as well. So people are changing toward the next kind of imaginative term. They're calling more like financial technology than internet finance. And they're stressing many of those platforms, for example, PPDai, who in 2018 actually changed their name into Finvolution Technology. So they're trying to say that they're a technology company, not a kind of a finance company. So I think that would be something interesting to respond.
Okay, so we have the next questions from Derek. Hi, Derek. So it's in the chat box, but I'll read it out. He said, I missed the explanation for how the discourse of financial inclusion in China was different from elsewhere. You mentioned that the issue was not absolute inclusion or exclusion from finance. There are other sources if people want loans, but rather the idea of inclusion linked to the idea of an innovative economy. So can you explain that a little bit more? Thank you.
Yeah. I think that's exactly I think it's a major part of what I'm trying to say, especially because in many other countries, the financial inclusion is about the increase of access to banking services. But in China, banking services is already quite widespread. But what concerns the state is that, for example, micro entrepreneurs, they cannot get fundings from banks or credits from banks easily because the bank was very strictly regulated by the other set of kind of state bureaucracy system. So the government wants to actually help out people who are doing business or they have their kind of business ideas to thrive in the market by encouraging more channels to include these people into kind of credit empowerments. So it actually started from a very how to say, kind of positive intentions, but then what they didn't know is actually financial inclusion. It means more convenient or easier credits, but it doesn't mean safer or cheaper credits. So so that is also the reason why the P2P platforms were not well regulated until 2018 and 19, because no kind of state authority besides the local governments wants to take care of these platforms, because they see these platforms as essentially very risky and may not produce kind of the promise that they want to produce.
Okay, anyone else? Gonzalo?
Yes, thank you, Yichen. This is a great talk, especially because I feel that I was with you when you started developing this this project in Hong Kong. Anyway, I have two questions, two very quick questions. One have to do with what you call the hidden script, and how you feel that you are revealing how market engineering works, and how your revelations somehow bring together moral boundaries or moral spaces that have been compartmentalized, right? And that somehow this compartmentalization has allowed many failures to be rendered invisible, right? So I think my question is whether to what extent it's hidden, or I mean, it seems to me that I can imagine many people, and this goes a little bit in the same direction that Loretta was talking about, looking at these P2P platforms as Ponzi schemes. I mean, I can imagine many people immediately thinking like that. And just as I can imagine people looking at, say, the way casinos make money, right, as, a very risky kind of avenue for ordinary citizens to follow in the pursuit of wealth. So I suppose what I'm saying is whether, I'm not sure if it's a matter of a mechanism being hidden, or rather it's more like something akin to gambling, actually, that we will be in a better position to understand why people feel attracted to P2P platforms if we think very much about why gamblers, ordinary citizens, right, feel attracted to the idea of going to a casino to gamble, right? Even though they know deep down that the chances of them winning are very slim, and that ultimately the winner is going to be the casino, right? It's just a question, sort of, I'm just wondering whether, the heathen metaphor is helpful, or whether it's something more akin to, we need to bring in something more akin to what's going on with gambling, right? So that's one kind of question, reflection. And the other one, has to do with the response of the government. And I'd like to push you a little bit more to kind of situate China's case in a sort of more global landscape of fintech articulations. And I'm kind of curious about the response of the government, to know a little bit more about the response of the government to what happened, who exactly was criminalized, and in which form this criminalization took place? Who paid for the losses? Was it the government? And I suppose I'm asking this question because I believe that the way that the government has responded should also be a part of the public script of what P2P platforms are and have become in 21st century China. And I think that should be made more clear as well. So two questions.
Yeah, I think there are two very insightful questions, especially the second one, because I'm writing a chapter right now on that. So I'm not sure I could give a very easy answer to either question, but I would try. So for the gambling question, it was very ironic in a sense because, everybody knows that there's no guaranteed payment these days in any kind of financial activities. Deep down, the state is actually reminding everyone that all your investment has risk, and this is very apparent when you go to any P2P platforms. They're required to tell you that you have to be very cautious about the investment. But on the other hand, so this is why I talk about the hidden part. So the hidden part is that, aside from all those kind of public scripts telling people that this whole thing is risky, there's always unconscious kind of signature, kind of a signaling, or I don't know how to say it in English very well. They're trying to work on people's unconscious by telling them this is okay. This is gambling. This is a safe gambling.
Yes.
This is ironically a safe gambling. It's a miracle. It's a kind of like a hole opened up in a capitalist world by the state to actually get you on the train. Because if you don't go now, and then you might lose it forever. You won't have it in the future. In the future, kind of opportunities to have this kind of safe gambling places. So I think the point is, so that is why I think that the hidden part is very ironic there. And on the other hand, about the government's response, it's complicated because which government are you talking about in the first place? Because as I was writing the chapter, people it's not only about the roles of different government actors, which include like financial regulatory committees, including the central bank, including the state council, which is the central government, and the local governments. They all have their own interpretations and agendas about these P2P platforms. And then, the people who lost their money. So when they are trying to find a kind of a criminal to blame, they often go to the local governments because they think the local governments or the local police actually get their platforms, their dreams, they build their dreams and then destroy it. But then on the other hand, they're thinking about, for example, the state as the ultimate savior. They hope the state could actually punish the local governments, or they want the state to really help, pressure the local governments in terms of clearing these platforms to actually guarantee their best interests. So it's very complicated in terms of who are there to be blamed and who are there to be criminalized. I think it's multiple parties negotiating with each other in terms of the final outcome. So the and also it also differs in terms of how these platforms collapse in the end. Is that really a scam, or is that just a mismanagement, or is it just because there are just too many other platforms collapse? So the remaining platforms, they have to collapse as well because there are no more investors coming in, and many borrowers become defaulters. So there are I don't know how I could provide an easy answer here, but I just hope to share with you the complicated pictures in terms of criminalizing. And in terms of the kind of global agenda of fintech, it's also interesting because initially the P2P banking was was actually something that China is blamed for, because they are part of the shadow banking business that should be regulated very well in terms of the kind of global regulatory scheme of banking business. So China, as a G20 country, supposedly have to not rely upon too many this kind of shadow banking business in order to thrive the economy. But then, China wants to boost the economy, and the banks are not doing a very good job in kind of reaching, as I just said, those kind of ground level entrepreneurs. So China is actually trying to balance these two parts when it comes to the kind of development versus regulation. So I think that's I think part of the framework there.
Sorry, just one final request, very small. So did the national government, central government, did it pay for compensation of any sort?
No.
No.
It's all private. They are all private lending. So it's actually go back to private sphere. The public has nothing to do with it.
So did the managers have to pay money back to borrow to the people who lost money?
They have, but it depends on how they should. If they just clear off their platform in a very kind of a soft way or a kind of peaceful way, they have to work a kind of with what they call AMC, asset management kind of companies, to deal with this kind of how to pay back people by doing all those accountings and reportings and stuff, and come up with solutions to satisfy different types of investors. But if they are intervened by the police, then the police will be the party to actually help handle the clearing off by inviting different agencies to help with the platform. And then if the police intervened, the arrested CEOs and the senior managers, their assets will be used to pay back people as well. So even their plane, there's some kind of stories about the CEO's planes and cars are also being sold in order to pay back the lenders' money.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are 13 minutes to the end of the seminar today. We got a comment from Magnus, just says insightful and great talk. So I wonder if anyone else have questions.
June, I think, wants to ask a question.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Yichen, for a great talk. Yeah, you're in my class, in the Economic Anthropology class, so very happy to see how far you has gone with the project. Actually, I have a comment, but also some questions. Some may be directly related, may not be. You don't have to answer them. A comment is it's about maybe a little bit more context. You actually mentioned it in the Q&A part, but I think maybe for an article before dissertations, I would actually like to see the emphasis on a little bit more on the context. For example, what does state-owned, so the banking, so basically we're talking about financing. So financing, of course, is a big part of the neoliberal reforms and all over the world since the 60s and 70s on. And you can consider part of what you're talking about is actually what a term called microfinancing, right? But microfinancing was developed, as you mentioned, primarily to deal with the issues of poverty, access to credit, which is not fully the story here. But the question is, I think maybe a little bit more on the state banking and economic development in China. So the banking system in China, as we all know, state-owned banks actually has a part of, it is actually not fully marketized in the sense of it actually still showed us a good part of the state agenda to push for development of certain economy. That's, and it is actually quite well known. For example, private companies have always have difficulties to borrow money. It's not only for individuals, but even companies. If you are not state-owned companies, it's actually very difficult to get money, to borrow money from the bank. I think that is part of the larger context. Why, what is the ground for this kind of internet borrowing? And actually shadow banking, the issues of shadow banking in China, Chinese government tried to deal with it since the 90s on. You will actually see, if you are willing to go back to look at archives, newspapers, shadow banking has always been the problem. And the governments have not been able to actually curb shadow banking. Not that they don't want to, but they cannot. And that actually go back to the big problem that the earlier questions, that it's about the state banks. What do the state banks, why the state banks are unwilling to lend? But at the same time, you have private initiative, the need for money to develop, and how different forms of organizations actually has been formed to lend money out before the so-called internet time. So then that actually leads to my questions. To what degree, what exactly the role of technology is here? I still want to have a little bit more a careful teasing out the role of technology. You mentioned during the talk that the platform, the technology, the platform itself becomes a means of trust. But from the ethnography, I feel like not necessarily. It seems to me that people are not drawn to it because this is technology. This is not just because it is internet. It is because, well, it is a 15 to 18% guarantee return. Or, there's some kind of insurance. Or you see your friends doing it and they make money out of it. So it seems to me none of them actually has anything to do with the platform or technology per se. So what exactly the role is technology here in terms of building trust, or in other, other kind of role in that whole, I would say that kind of a whole messy relations of knowledge production, control of knowledge, risk evaluations, and so on and so forth. So what I have seen here is actually a story about, you can actually, from knowledge production's perspective, there's a lot of miscommunication. There's a lot of parallel communication, so understanding. Different people talks about different things. There are different channels of knowledge. And it's very difficult to evaluate which one is more trustworthy than the other. So I think then it gets into a more complicated issues about why people consider certain information is more trustworthy than others. So for example, when you talk about the hidden scripts and the public script, basically what you describe here is people believe what they want to believe. So yes, they are giving the kind of agreement telling them every investment has a risk, but they don't want to believe it. They are willing to believe that basically the risk is close to zero. So the question is why? How is that possible? I mean, again, back to the context question, is that if you look at stock market, the fluctuations of stock market in China, also the fluctuations of the real estate market in China, every time when there's a big going down in the stock market or in real estate market, you very often see people coming out protest, asking government to guarantee the price will only go up, or asking the government to punish those people who make the price going down. And very often you actually see government responded in one way or another. So there seems to me, again, we have to go back to the role of the governments in terms of regulating or intervening in the operations of these kind of a highly fluctuated commodity market. So yeah, sorry for being speaking for so long.
Okay, I think you asked several questions, but I would maybe address the role of technology first, because I think that's the key question here. And also, of course, I think it goes a lot with the whole, the people's feelings about banks, and especially about state-owned banks, and the very, complicated experiences people go into banks. I think in my paper I quoted Tom McDonald's paper on, how people were actually, finding this digital payment apps more friendly and kind of more easy to use, and especially compared with the traditional banks. And that is a very major component of China's kind of combination of financial inclusion and digital inclusion. So for example, when Alipay and all sorts of kind of financial innovations also led by Alipay and Alibaba together, they're actually shaping a very new kind of user experience way of thinking about finance and thinking about how I could actually get financial services differently. So I have the first chapter talking about how the market of the internet finance is actually built upon this initial success of, for example, Taobao and Alipay, and how the people is getting used to, the very smooth experience of having their money transferred very easily, safely, securely, flexibly through these digital apps. And that build up a very, I think, a solid kind of infrastructural preparation and psychological preparation for people to think that, okay, even though it is just an internet platform, it could be also safe. And then what's more, it's more convenient, it's more friendly, and it's, I don't have to have any kind of investor knowledge, and I could do very well in this B2B platform. So I could earn 20% annually, not knowing any kind of investors knowledge, going back to the idea of financial literacy. So I think this is, I think, a very important part in helping people.
There's a big jump from easy to use to you believe that it can give you 20% of return. So there's a big jump in the, it's a great leap forward kind of belief.
It's not a great leap forward because there are a lot of steps already taken before. But unfortunately, I can't speak them all out here because we don't have enough time. And the other question about the government. Especially because, like those all kind of internet economy development has to go with the government's kind of approval. So for example, if we trace back to when Taobao and Alipay established their business, so there are a lot of negotiations between the state and Alibaba about their power. I mean, Alibaba's power in setting up financial agenda differently, and Alipay nearly died, a few years earlier, but then it's simply because the state actually balanced, the interests of the market. This is kind of the interests of markets before, the interests of the regulation. So that, the internet finance actually has a space to grow during the 2014 to 2015. So that's also, I think, a very, as you raised that, it's a very important aspect of the market growth.
Okay, so we have 2 minutes left. Probably should wrap up unless someone have a quick comment. Okay, I'll do. I think the questions that of technology that Joan raised was valid, and it's important to address because you gave so much emphasis to the platform. So my suggestions would be to maybe conceptualize technology not as this single tool, this single platform, but follow the French traditions of seeing technology as an assemblages. So if you think of technology as an assemblages, then it all makes sense. Like, who's behind this platform? Who's someone that they know who work there, and the news and the knowledge, the communication produced from this person. So I think that may be one way to overcome that slip that seems to be like what Jung was saying. Yeah, and I think that also, if you look at technology that way, maybe that will also help you differentiate, the issue, what's the difference between this P2P lending and gambling that Gonzalo was talking about, because the communication and the people in this whole assemblages are different from gambling in a casino. So I think if you look at technology that way, instead of looking at it as just a platform, you know, this internet tool, this internet app, then maybe you will be able to address some of these questions. So that's 1:30, and thank you so much for this great talk. It's very interesting, and I look forward to reading more of your work in the future. And thank you so much for being our speaker, you know, in 2021, and being on board as one of the convener of the Sci-Tech seminar. So I wonder if Gonzalo would like to say a little bit about the talk, the next talk in the end of January before we go.
Thank you, Loretta, and thank you, Yichen, for your lovely presentation. I'm looking forward to read the written version, because there is already a written version. The next Sci-Tech Asia webinar will take place on the 25th of January. And we are very privileged to have one of the most famous Japanese sociologists, Azumi Tsugi, who is going to talk to us about recent developments in Japan in terms of legal regulations of assisted reproductive technology. So I'm very much looking forward to that. So January 25th, Professor Azumi Tsugi. Thank you very much, Yichen. This was a great talk, and Happy New Year, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you guys for coming. Happy New Year.